Why you won't die if you won't eat for days to weeks? Yes, you've heard that right. As much as we want to believe that we will die if we cannot eat 3 times a day, more so if we fast for one day or even a week, that is simply not true. Science show that we can actually live up to weeks even without eating. And today we will discuss the science behind it. I will discuss the results of one study entitled Effects of Intermittent Fasting on Cardiometabolic Health and Energy Metabolism Perspective, because now actually it is now a known science, a known fact that intermittent fasting or scheduling when you are going to eat in a day is actually good for your health. Lessening your meals to 2 times a day or even once a day sometimes can even do good when it comes to your metabolic health as compared to eating too much. I will just be brief and discuss the important substrate utilization, or when or where to get our energy during fasting. So if you can see this table on the side, I hope that is clear. I will discuss that. It is only showing where your body will get the energy if ever you will choose not to eat for 72 hours or 3 days. So in here, a, there we have two graphs here, the A and B. The A graph will show you the colors, wherein green would represent carbohydrates, red would be protein, and yellow would be fats. So those are the major source of energy from your body depending on the time of your fasting. And on letter B graph, that is where your body will get those carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, especially that you are already not eating. So I hope that is clear. So the first part would be the first 12 hours. So during the first 12 hours of fasting, where will you get your energy? So it's mostly the green, so this part. So the if you it's not very clear if you're watching in your phone or small tablets, you can see that the first here, the x-axis would be 0. Next would be 12 hours, and then 24 hours, 36 hours, 48, 60, and 72 hours. The same goes with this one. So we will go through it one by one so that you can appreciate more what is happening to our body, and so that you will not worry if ever there will come a time that you cannot eat if you are trapped in a certain environment or certain situation where there's no food. Then you need not to worry. At minimum, you have at least 3 days that you can live even without food. So, moving forward, so first, during the first 12 hours, majority of your energy will come from carbohydrate. And if we match the letter A, 0 to 12, to the letter B in 0 to 12 hours, those carbohydrates, the simple form of carbohydrates before it will be made into energy, will become glucose. So this glucose is mostly coming from food, especially if you are not a low carber. So this one is also somewhat the same transition from high carb food intake to low carb food intake, but this one is stretched maybe in a week time or a week's time, depending on how low carb you go and how strict you go with your low carb. But thinking only about fasting per se, we are just looking at no energy, no food intake at all. The first 12 hours, you will use up the glucose coming from the food that you ate. And then after 12 hours, so that's going to be 24 hours already. So your body will now start to burn fats. And the majority of that energy is still coming from glucose, so, or carbohydrates, so the green one. Starting 12 hours of fasting, of no food intake, say for example you last ate at 7 in the evening, so 7 p.m., that's the last time that you ate. So from 7 in the evening to 7 in the morning, while you are sleeping and not eating, your body is using the fuel from your last food intake, which is from mostly from glucose, especially if you're a high carber. And by the morning you wake up, by 7 in the morning, you already feel hungry, right? And if you will not give in to that hunger, your body will actually start to break down fats, and it can supplement partly your energy needs in a day. If you can notice, there will always be that part where proteins are continuously being used, also used as substrate or as energy. So, and you can see that it's consistent even until we fast for 72 hours. So, those that are worried that their muscles will atrophied, will diminish, will shrink if they do fasting, it's not gonna happen, especially if you do fasting right. So, by 24 hours, actually, you are already mostly on fat burning. So you are still using some carbohydrates coming from glucose, and this time it will come from gluconeogenesis and glycogenolysis. If you can look at our table B, there is light green there. There's glucose from glycogenolysis. Glycogenolysis is a process of breaking down your stored glycogen, mostly coming from your liver. Because when we are on our normal day to day eating habits, we have a reservoir, we have a reserved glucose in the form of glycogen. This is being stored normally and even become more complex for those athletes who are doing carbo loading. So when you are carbo loading, you are actually saving glucose in the form of glycogen in your liver. So after the glucose in your bloodstream that came from the last food that you ate is depleted, is already used up, your body will now start to break down glycogen from your liver and be made into glucose. So that is glucose from glycogenolysis, and in here it is going to be supplemented by glucose from gluconeogenesis. So you can see here that your body can actually make its own glucose. I have to correct that. The gray one is just partly from glucose, still coming from your food, because the fatty acid here is now the fats that you are burning. So you can see that after 24 hours, your body is mostly going to use up fats as energy and no longer glucose. And this fats is mostly coming from your fat sources. And our fat sources is almost equivalent to unlimited when it comes to our capacity to fast. So in here you can see it's up to 72 hours, but on average an average person will actually have a fat stores equivalent to weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, up to 6 weeks of energy storage in the body in the form of fats. Although we will need other things, and not just fats and not just the calories from fats. We will need certain vitamins, we will need certain electrolytes, minerals. But when it comes to fats per se or calorie per se, we can get it from our fat stores. This is the reason why you won't actually die if you don't eat for days to weeks. And it is even considered to be healthy to engage into fasting, especially cycles of intermittent fasting, maybe 18 hours, 24 hours, at least a few times a week. And for those who want to do fasting for healing, there are different protocols like 3 days fast in 1 month, or 1 week fast in 1 quarter, or once every year of doing 5 to 7 days of fasting. And people have been practicing this all over the world in millions. Mostly, the most popular are those that are doing fasting for religious reasons, but there are now a growing number of people who are doing extended fasting for healing. How does healing happen when it comes to fasting? If you can look at the table in letter B, there's a blue green there. So that's glucose from gluconeogenesis. So gluconeogenesis is a as an occurrence in our body, which means glucose, so that's blood sugar, neo, which means new, and genesis is creation. So our body is actually capable of making its own glucose from scratch. This is the basis why we consider glucose or sugar non-essential. It is considered non-essential because our body can create its own glucose from scratch. We don't need to take it in. For those who are saying that we cannot live without rice, we cannot live without bread, without potato, without pasta, without sugar, then that is the sugar addiction speaking. It's not really a biochemical need because our body can create its own glucose from non-carbohydrate sources. So what does that mean? Your body can actually recycle certain parts in your body and be made into glucose, and it's two ways that it is beneficial. It is giving you the glucose that you need, the little glucose that you need during times of fasting, because as much as majority of our body can actually live and adapt to using ketones or fats as energy, but there will always be that part of our cells of our body that will always use glucose, including our red blood cells. But we don't need to take it in from food. Again, glucose can be made by our liver and to some extent by our kidneys through the process of gluconeogenesis, and it can only be activated well and on a healthy and healing level when we are engaging fasting. Why? Because the recycling materials, the materials that our body will need to create glucose, will actually be coming from the garbage that was building up all these years in our lives. So these build up are also called misfolded proteins, and the erroneous proteins that gets dumped and get stuck in our cells, that's making our cell not so functional. That is why we have a lot of aches and pains. That's why our brain over time is not functioning so well. We tend to become forgetful. We tend to be less focused. Our eyesight becomes blurry, or we have problems with our vision, and so many other things. Sometimes it can be presented as tumors or masses in any parts of our body. So those are proteins that got stuck in our system, and we need to clean them. And the only time that our body will remember on cleaning them is when we first deprive ourselves of energy or food. So that is why fasting is very, very important. This is the concept of autophagy. Autophagy, or the self-eating mechanism in our body. Autophagy is an award-winning, Nobel Prize-winning concept by a Japanese scientist, wherein he discovered that during periods of fasting or no food intake, our body start to eat certain part of itself, the erroneous, the malfunctioning parts, and even cellular parts. So there's microphagy, there's macrophagy. So it can be in small parts or in large parts, but largely it is going to use up the defective parts in our body and be made into glucose or be made into other functional parts, while at the same time cleansing our system. You can think of it as a general cleaning time for our body, and that can only happen if you give your body a break from eating. So that is why glucose is non-essential, and activating gluconeogenesis, especially for those who haven't tried it, is actually good for us. And this is the reason why we will not die if we don't eat for days, even up to weeks. As a personal experience, I've been on fasting for more than 40 months now, and I did 1 day fast, and 3 days fast, 7 days fast, and the longest fasting that I did was 2 weeks. And yes, I am still alive, and it's because I know exactly what goes on in my body during this period. If you wish to know more, there are a lot of videos on intermittent fasting. I also have a book on fasting, especially on how to do it safely. It's Perfect at Last Weight. It is available in Amazon, and you can look it up to understand and to know how to do fasting the safe and right way. So in here, the very concept of this graph is just to show you that your body is capable of enduring prolonged periods of no food intake. And I'm not saying that you need to do it and you really have to do it. Of course not, because fasting for more than 24 to 48 hours is best done with a medical supervision under the guidance of a doctor. If you are not a doctor yourself or you do not have the needed means and ways to monitor yourself, like blood pressure, blood sugar monitoring, and if you will have ketone meter, then it's best if you can do so. But it's just an assurance that if ever there will come a time that you miss a meal and you cannot eat for one meal or two meals, or you are cornered in a situation where you have to fast for one day, I hope this is enough reassurance that you know that you will not die. Instead, you can savor and be happy with that victory, that you are able to tap the junk that is in your system. You are able to cleanse your system. You are able to provide that general cleaning that your body was sorely looking for all these years. Because if we base it on evolution, our ancestors, which made up eventually our genetic makeup, we are so used to cyclic and periodic periods of fasting, and that is why our metabolism can actually benefit if we incorporate intermittent fasting or IF in our system. So there are many schedules in intermittent fasting. There is alternate day fasting, wherein you fast one day and you eat the next day. But there are also extended fasting, wherein you fast for 2 days straight, 3 days straight, 4 days straight, or 7 days straight, and you can just drink the items that will not break your fast. Say, for example, water and certain electrolytes like salt. And for some who cannot live on water alone, then they can accommodate some coffee or some plain tea, but just be mindful that consuming a lot of coffee during your fasting might not do you so well, because there's a risk of you being dehydrated if you don't supplement with the right electrolytes, because coffee or caffeine can also serve as a diuretic. It will make you pee more and you will tend to lose electrolytes, not just water. So fasting, there are so many ways to do it, and you don't need to rush yourself. That is why, if it's first time for you to hear about fasting and low carb, before I started fasting first before low carb, but now I understood that if I want to maximize and be smooth with my fasting routine, it is best paired with low carb. So for those who want to transition slowly, you can just eat low carb foods first, and then eventually, when you are eating the right kind of low carb and right amount of low carb food, you will see that your body will actually become appetite corrected, and you will just fast naturally. It will come naturally. You will just surprise yourself that the usual time that you are always hungry may not be evident anymore. You might feel that the time that you used to be eating like 6 a.m., 7 a.m. breakfast, and then hungry the whole day, if you eat low carb, you will notice that you will actually tend to eat less, because not because you are saving or you are doing it purposely, but when you do low carb, your appetite will be corrected and you will see that you actually don't need so much food, although it is not about eating less, but eating right. And mind you, the moment you eat right, you will just see that you will also tend to eat less as compared to how you've been eating before. So that's just the basic concept of our video for today. That's why you won't die if you won't eat for days, 2 weeks. So I hope you learned a little something today, and thank you so much for your support. I hope I will see you on National Low Carb Day on October 2, 2022 for those who wish to attend virtually also. Our early bird promo is still up in www.nationallowcarbday.com, and it's only 500 pesos or less than $10 for those who wish to attend and support our National Low Carb Day in order for us to have a whole community of low carbers and intermittent fasters, and most importantly, healthy from the outside to the inside. So I hope I'll see you in our next video. This is your Diet Doktora, Dr. Josephine Grace Rohatan. Always remember to stay low carb so that we all stay safe. Bye bye, everyone. Have a good night.